Welcome again to part 2 with Travis McAshan. This is Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. In these fireside chats, we talk with people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. Today's guest, again, is Travis. Travis, founder of CEO at Glide, an Austin-based digital agency that creates impactful user-centered web experiences. With nearly 20 years in the industry, he leads a team focused on ethical design and strategic innovation for startups and nonprofits. Travis combines creativity with measurable results, championing transparency and positive social impact. Thank you for being here, Travis. Appreciate you coming here again.
Thank you for having me. It's round 2, it looks like.
It's round 2. So, we talked a lot about Glide, a lot about the culture that you've built there, a lot about how you interact with your teams. You had incredible amount of insight, and it's obvious you've done your homework. I mean, you shared a lot with us, which was pretty meaningful. Give us a little bit of a refresher on Glide, on the team. How many people are there with you? Tell me a little bit about the things that you do.
Sure. So Glide, we're an Austin-based organization. We started this company in 2003. So basically been doing this most of my adult life. And it's wild. I actually had a doc up that I use and share with folks. But ultimately, a creative agency, really what we do, our core service offering is web design and development. I would say kind of straddled to that are 2 other core disciplines, which is brand strategy and then digital marketing. To me, brand strategy is upstream, digital marketing is downstream, but our core, our heart is really user experience for the web. And, I was actually reading a book called Market of One by Robin Bond. It's just a really beautiful book about how, there's not, the market isn't saturated, it's just under differentiated, and so it's just an interesting thing to think about. And his whole process starts with belief and like, what do you believe? And it's funny, man, I've been doing what I've been doing for so long. I've probably like created ideas and forgot them, 5 times over. And so, but I just was thinking a lot. I spent about 3 hours last night thinking about all of the people, the movements, the organizations, the agencies that has inspired me in my beliefs. And it's funny that there was something that's literally been on my wall for 15 years, that I've even transferred from one house to another, that I still put back on the wall. And it's a quote by the Shaker. So there's this kind of movement, and the quote is this: it's, don't make something unless it is both necessary and useful. I'm looking at it on the wall, but I memorize it. Don't make something unless it is both necessary and useful. But if it is both necessary and useful, don't hesitate to make it beautiful. And it's just this concept of fundamental design. Beautiful design is not necessarily about ornamentation. It's about stripping things down to the essence of what makes it useful and beneficial. And you can have a doorknob or a chair that's beautiful in essence, and it's just utilitarian. It's simple, it's simple and clear, and it works perfectly. And the elements of it kind of contribute to the aesthetic, overall. And so I was like, wow, this is a metaphor for my life. And it's funny. I don't even think about like vacations because, I love my family, love my kids, and we try to do stuff, but like, I love to that my life would be useful, and I want my company to be an extension of that. And so, and we do that through the lens of design. So design for good, design to move people to get them to take action. And so I'm probably meandering, but, just like the journey I've been on over the last week, thinking about all of these things, has been pretty mind blowing. And, some of the kind of core elements of this, user-centered design, using business as a force of good, just the concept of empathy. I was thinking about a quick story, if it's okay to share, about, I would say about 5 or 10 years ago, I can't remember, maybe about 7 years ago, we had the opportunity to work with one of the largest online Medicare sites, by one of the world's largest online healthcare companies. And it was a long, complicated process. We actually had to recruit a CRO company that specializes in conversion optimization, funnel analysis, and using AI heat maps and all kinds of other kind of novel technology at the time. And we probably did something like 400 plus tests, user tests, and they're simulated and online, and we were inundated with data. And ultimately, we kind of came to a place where we're like, we can see that it's broken. The conversion rate of the site was exceedingly low. The recommendation engine was faltering. And I mean, this is an organization that's serving millions of people a year. And so I had the crazy idea to say, why don't we just get our parents to test this thing? So we had already kind of mocked up and iterated like multiple versions of this entire workflow. And you can imagine the complexity of Medicare, right? Like
Yeah.
the entire process, getting someone who's in their 50s to 70s to be able to go through an interactive experience and choose the right Medicare plan, and the amount of empathy that's required. And I don't know why we didn't think about this earlier. I mean, we do user centered design and we do interviews and things like that, but using our parents took things to a whole nother level. And like I remember vividly watching my mom, someone who I care about more than just about anyone else in my life, like using something that we have made through a lot of intentional thought, and just watching her struggle to like go through this process, getting stuck on different steps, thinking that a chat bubble was an ad and not trying to get help through chat, and so this like the empathy was turned up to 12. And we used a lot of this feedback and iterated. We brought our parents back in after we'd made changes to these designs, and it was a beautiful project. And ultimately, interestingly, the caveat is that our work actually didn't get published, which was a little bit of a tragedy, in my opinion, because it was objectively better. Like it was tested to prove to be better. But with large organizations, sometimes there's politics, there's budgets, priorities, competing factions, and things like that. But our project stakeholder was so moved and impressed by our work that he gave us a multi-thousand-dollar tip. Like, so we were paid
Oh,
very well.
wow.
Like we were paid very well for the work. But this guy out of his own pocket wrote us a personal check of multiple $1,000s. We ended up taking that money and putting it toward a mini retreat for our team that did the project. So we had everybody come together and fly in, um, and we did like challenge, what do you call those, like um, escape rooms and all
Oh,
this stuff.
fun.
But the point I'm trying to make is I just think that that's a really great story to encapsulate what our true beliefs are, is just that what we do is so much more than just make a website, right? It is about empathy, it is about clarity and transparency, and turning something from being a static brochure to something that moves people to take action.
Almost feels like for a snapshot in time, a brief period, they're bringing on like another founder just for that small period of time that they're working with you, right? Because you have that level of buy-in to your customer.
Oh yeah,
Um,
so important.
but I actually go. I love what you said about under differentiated. Um, that's that's really powerful, and it's true. And if it wasn't true, frankly, there wouldn't be yet another hotel opening up on whatever that corner is, right? Or another you know fast food restaurant. I mean, there's a lot, and clearly there isn't oversaturation, but maybe under differentiation for sure. I really want to learn a little bit from being somebody who creates technology, being somebody um, who is in a sense, right? You're a digital design, or you focus on a lot of digital design. I want to hear about the platforms and the software and the systems that you use for the teams that you work with, for managing, for engaging, for collaborating with these folks. I mean, your team is distributed, right? And you guys work on a lot of things at the same time. How do you collaborate with them? And if you don't want to mention specific platforms, totally fine. Just curious about the types of solutions you leverage.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we're an open book. I mean, I've always said I'll publish our whole business plan online. Like there is no, I mean, there's no such thing as competition. I mean, really, we're in competition with ourselves. Like all of the battle is inside your head of like what you're trying to accomplish, and if you have the kind of wherewithal to see it through. And so, absolutely happy to share any and everything, whether people want to reach out after or whatever. We were sharing a little bit before the call. This past year, I actually sat down and we put together very comprehensive operating budgets that span sales and marketing, administrative and HR, and then general. Um, and I think I counted 63 separate platforms across all of the different business functions.
That's insane.
So we have, essentially kind of three major business functions. We have client acquisition, client success, and then HR, admin, legal, all the other stuff, right? So it's sales and marketing, rev ops, as some people call it, and then client delivery. All of our project services and support. And so when you kind of break those three apart, starting with, obviously a lot of what you guys do is in the HR admin space. And so, some of the platforms that have really been effective for us, was a platform called 15.5. And so being a virtual and distributed agency, it is tough to kind of keep the pulse and to check in. When you are on a Zoom call for 30 minutes, especially with a company like ours as a 4-day work week, we had to kind of reinvent how to be efficient with our time with one less day a week. And so it is like a conflict with culture where, when you get on a call, you really have to get to work. And so you can't have a lot of small talk. Um, and if you're not having small talk on calls and you're not in person, then where are you having these moments of connection where you can
Yeah.
kind of check in with people? And so, um, kind of like my role, quote unquote, in the EOS terminology as visionary is to kind of like stimulate progress to like, come up with 12 new ideas every day. And like one of them is good and 11 are bad, but I can't tell. I think they're all great. And so it's up to the rest of the team to kind of take these ideas and see which ones make sense. But one of these ideas was using a platform called 15.5. The idea concept behind this platform is you spend 15 minutes, um, or what is it? Yeah, so 15 minutes once a week, and you basically check in with everybody. And so instead of like waiting a year to have an annual review, each week you answer a couple of key questions related to how your week went. There's a mood pulse, which just rates your kind of mood on a scale of 1 to 5, um, and then you add just some feedback about how your week's been going. It takes less than 5 minutes to do. It takes your manager less than 15 minutes to review all of these things, and we've been using that for about 5 years, and I think it's highly effective. And so, we use EOS, so we have a scorecard and a spreadsheet, and every week we look at how many people, what is the percentage of people at our company that checked in. So we have about 25 FTE. Some of those are contractors, so we don't mandate that they fill out. So we'll say of 20 people, our check-in, we want to see our check-in be about 80%, about 80% of the time, or 80% of the people checking in each week. And then our mood pulse, which is just, how are you feeling? How does your week go? And it's an interesting open-ended question, because you could have the flu that week and have a meeting pulse of 2, or you could have the worst client experience you've ever had in your life and have a meeting pulse of 2, right? So it's personal and professional all kind of merged together. But I think ultimately it needs to be that way, because you're looking at the whole person, right? It's like you can't separate out, if this person's struggling at home, then they're inevitably going to take that into work, and it's our job as managers to be empathetic to that. And so we look at this at a macro level at the whole company, but then also we have groups into teams, so we can look at kind of the mood pulse for each team of the company. So it's the SEO team, the project managers, leadership, our design team, and be able to see, gosh, we're really low. Like, what's going on? And we might find it's one person, 1 or 2 people. I mean, we're a pretty small company, right? So, um, but I think that tool has been highly effective. It's also got something in it called the 360-degree review. We used to do biannually, now we do annually, which is very comprehensive and laborious, but it is extremely powerful. In fact, it's so powerful. It asks all these different questions about, your progress, and it does just what you think a 360 does, right? So you're getting feedback from people above you, the people below you, people to the left and right, and all of these questions kind of get into this gigantic multi-page report. Well, you can take this report, put it into AI, and have it give you an action plan, as a manager in 5 minutes that would take hours to kind of process. And so I've gone into one-on-one reviews for an annual session, having processed this information with the kind of a strategic prompt framework that have blown away the people that I've reviewed. They're coming out of this meeting going, this is like the most beneficial thing that I've ever
Yeah.
experienced. And because it's talking about, here's where you have areas to grow. Here's areas here's your strengths. Here's areas you have to grow. Here's your trajectory. Here's what I see. And then awesome questions to elicit further feedback. And so that platform has been game changing for us, like from an administrative perspective. And then let's see what else. I mean, but any reflections on that before I continue on?
I think that's awesome. I mean, I think that the fact that you're willing to put in that time and that effort to make everybody's experience, better is, I think, definitely a sign of great leadership. But this is, yeah, exactly what I was curious about. You have such a high performing team, right? You have a team that's going to go above and beyond, right, for all of your customers and clients, even the ones who don't publish your work. And it's evident, right, in the job that they do. So, I think that anybody sort of listening to that and hearing that, I mean, we can certainly make this, an infomercial about 15.5, but I mean, anybody really listening to that and hearing that kind of feedback, I think would be meaningful, right? Because there's going to be a lot of people who are really interested to know what are the steps that I can actually take to do the things that you're talking about, to get the feedback from my team, to get, action plans, right, to make people's experience better, or whatever kind of performance management they're looking to pursue.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like. It's interesting you said that. I think like immediately I think like tactics, right? Like one of my like favorite professional quotes of all time is um, amateurs focus on tactics, professionals have a process. Use a process, and like it's by Pete Lejeune. He was the co-founder of CXL, which was a famous conversion optimization agency. And when I heard that quote, I was like, "Oh man, that's so good!" Because a lot of times we all do this. I mean, I've been on podcasts where the podcast authors, like their audience is mid-market marketing leaders, CMOs, and they're like, "Tell me three things, five things that marketing leaders can change on their homepages," right? And I'm just like, "What kind of question is that?" Like, it doesn't even compute in my head. There's like 100 things that I need to do before I need to tell you what changes you need to make on your homepage.
Yeah.
Like strategy comes first, and strategy is not a plan. It's not a checklist. It's how you're going to win. And how you're going to win starts with what are your business objectives and what are your user needs? Okay, now let's figure out, from that and triangulate to, what is the technology that's going to get you there. And
Yeah.
anyway, so kind of bringing this back to this space, like I would be remiss if I didn't share how we got to that. And, the thing that we did that I think was the most beneficial as it relates to helping our people is to clarifying our purpose, clarifying like why. So there's purpose, which is why do you exist? There's mission, which is okay. Now you know why you exist and get out of bed. What are you doing every day out of that purpose? That's mission.
Mhm.
That's like the day to day. And then vision. If you were to come out of this purpose and live out your mission on a day to day basis, how would the world change for the better? And describe that in a vivid description. And so, purpose, mission, and vision are three separate things. And then there's one additional thing, which is your core values, which course correct you along the way. We talked a little bit about this on our last call.
Yeah.
So, purpose, mission, values, and vision. These are the four things. And so my recommendation is before you choose any tools, if you don't have those four things, that's where I would recommend. And I think that purpose and values are the most important. I think that you could probably get a long way with just those two alone. Mission is a nuance. I think vision is difficult, especially in the age of AI, where we don't know if we're going to be managed by AI overlords in 10 years. Like so
Very
like
possible.
so purpose and values, like, but values, like, you can come back to those. Like, you could be lost in a sea of uncertainty and just look at your values for direction alone. But so that's where I would start. And, there's so many good people that are so much smarter and, more knowledgeable about all this stuff. Jim Collins talks a lot about, the hedgehog concept and just this concept of like good, good to great. Some of his really awesome books, How the Mighty Fall, Great by Choice. This is just really good books that kind of talk about purpose and his concept of core ideology, which is really core values, and your kind of envisioned future. But and then Pat Lencioni talks a lot about values. and he knows way more than I do about that stuff. So read The Advantage by Pat Lencioni if you want to learn about that. But so there's that. But then the second thing I think is, especially as it relates to your people, the best thing that we ever did. If like people walk away from this podcast and they've watched this and like, look, we now are we have been featured as Inc. Best Place to Work for the second year in a row. So that's a little bit of credibility for the people listening. There's only 500 companies in the United States that have achieved that honor. There's only 20 in Austin that have achieved that this year. We've also won Built-In and Fortune and a number of others. But the point I'm trying to make is we have credibility, to be
Mm-hmm.
talking about this. But the best thing that we ever did for our people was in 2020, we mapped our employee journey and visually. And heck, I mean, I could even share my screen and show you guys all. I mean, I'd be happy to.
Was this a democratic process that you went through? Did you have your team involved in mapping the journey, or was this just leadership?
It was primarily leadership. In fact, it wasn't even just the leadership team. It was primarily myself and our people ops manager, who at the time was one of our lead project managers, but had a deep passion for people, very empathetic.
Okay.
Her and I were kind of the core drivers of this, but it was absolutely influenced at every step of the way by just listening, right? Because I think empathy, again, going back to empathy, is critical. So we mapped the entire journey, and we read a number of books together to kind of really infuse the ideas. There's a really great book called The Employee Journey. I think that's the book, but it was actually written in another language. We had to find a translated version, like a special order from Europe. It was crazy, but um, there's not as much on this as you think. I think that employer brand, I've heard this term a couple times now. I didn't even know what that meant, but apparently that's like, how do employees see your brand as a place to work?
Mm-hmm.
And people are realizing how incredibly important that is to have a strong employer brand. But this thing didn't employer brand didn't exist, I think, 5 years ago. So or maybe it did, but I'd never heard of it. you know, but but what I want to encourage people is figure out what your stages to your employee journey are, because they're not going to be the same at every company. We identified some core stages, starting with recruiting all the way through alumni. So finding people to hire and hiring them, so recruiting to onboarding, and then all the way to offboarding and people and maintaining people in your alumni. Like loving on people that have previously worked at your company. So that whole life cycle. Um, and so we mapped the whole thing, including all of our employee benefits and where that falls into our journey. And we color coded it according to how bad we sucked. So, like, I mean, to give you context, in 2019, I had 0 employees. They were all contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I had some bad experiences early in my company history. And I was like, man, employees suck. I don't want employees. You know, I'm going to make money their boss, so if they don't work, they don't get paid. And, I came across a quote in 2019 doing a business blueprint with a business coach, and the quote was, "You're either building your dream or someone is paying you to build theirs." And it was like I got stabbed in the heart, and I was like, "Man, I don't want to take advantage of people. I don't want to be the only person that benefits from all this hard work, and all of the opportunity I'm creating is mine and mine alone." And so I went on a journey of hiring everybody, like giving them what we have now is we probably have like the 1% of 1% benefits. Like, I mean, we are offering some pretty elite level benefits at Glide now, but we did not start that way. We had nothing, like I had a bunch of contractors. The second they stopped working, they got nothing, nothing.
Right, right.
And, and even when we hired our first employees, they still didn't have health insurance or 401k or, all the basic benefits, vacation, parental leave. Um, but the point I was trying to make was, and I'll be succinct because I tend to talk a lot, but so we mapped this employee journey. We called it the glider journey. And we color coded it according to where we felt like we were underperforming. And we just went to work. And so each quarter, we use EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it has quarterly rocks, which are just projects that you do on a quarterly basis, a 90-day cycle. And every quarter, and we would look at what we're trying to accomplish for the year. And then we would sequence the quarterly goals to accomplish the annual goal for that year for our employee journey. And so, some goals took 3 quarters to accomplish, right? You do part one, part two, part three. Part one is just research what the plan is. Part two is execute the plan. Part three is see how it worked, um, and so I just want to encourage people, if you've never done that before, and I want to encourage people too, if you want to see our literal version of our employee journey, I'd be happy to share it. Um, and then one final note on that, and I'll shut up. But about 2 years ago, we identified an additional path, which is kind of just thinking about our team and realizing, where do they go? Like, how do we have trajectories for people to grow and become a better version of themselves? And we created an additional kind of dimension, which is the leadership journey. And
Okay.
so we realized that it starts with personal leadership, and then we have two paths: either subject matter expertise or true leadership management. Because some people don't want to. Like, it's not a natural consequence that the longer you're at a company and the better you get, that you're going to get promoted and manage people. Some people don't
Right.
want to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
They're just a rock star at design or SEO or whatever. And so and they want to be the best in the world at it. And so, helping them, contributing to them becoming a subject matter expert, sending them to conferences, getting them to write and to research, and then you have people that are just on the leadership track, and management, through training. So that additional dimension, I think, has been really powerful for us over the last few years.
I love that. And I'm curious. So with all these platforms that they use, with all the feedback that you get from 15.5, um, data is big, right? It works its way into all these conversations. A vast amount of data can be spit out from a lot of these systems. What kind of insights and analytics are most important to you and leadership? Are there things you wish you could measure that you can't? Do you think that there are things that you get that simply aren't really moving the needle?
Yeah, I think it's organization specific, because we're a professional services company who sells services, not products. One of the most important data points is utilization rates.
Right.
So every person at Glide tracks their time through a platform called Harvest, which is kind of an industry leading time tracking platform for professional services companies. So we track our time in Harvest. Um, and from that, we can look at project profitability. We can look at overall utilization rates, just tracked hours period. Because we offer a 4-day work week, it's pretty imperative that people get a sufficient number of hours tracked. Because, if you have a professional services company, you're working 40 hours a week and someone gets 35 or 38 hours, no big deal. But if you're in a 32-hour week and you only get 30 hours or 28 hours, come on, man. Like,
Yeah.
just get your hours. So, but I think utilization rate, which then directly translates to profitability, which is the lifeblood of a healthy organization. Another thing too is just culture, right? So when you're looking at, so that's profitability, revenue. um, and we obviously use we're QuickBooks Online, which is a pretty prototypical finance platform. And so we have, in our EOS scorecard, which is our weekly scorecard. So every week we meet in a cadence of a weekly meeting called the L10, or level 10 leadership meeting, with our leadership team. And we have a scorecard with about 20 plus metrics. And they're broken into 4 parts. So we kind of have revenue operations, and then we have culture or people ops. And then we have revenue ops, people ops, and then we have client ops. So people ops is our people, client ops is our clients, and then we have finance. And so each of those has about 5 metrics. And so we pull these metrics from different platforms. So most of our financial metrics coming from QuickBooks, and we're looking at things like um, our monthly recurring revenue. We're looking at billable hours. We're looking at profitability over a 90-day and one in a 365 to kind of see like profitability trends. But I'll give you guys one interesting metric that I track that I don't know if anyone else in the world. I'm not going to say anyone else in the world. I'm not that unique, but I guarantee you most people don't track. I track how many shout outs our team gives every week. So at Glide, we have a channel called shout outs. And
To each other.
correct. So each week, for the last 5 years, we've tracked this, and the team, has been nebulous on if we should continue to track this. I think it's still important as a metric for culture, but we're averaging thousands, like 3 to 5 thousand shout outs per year. On a team of 20 people, if you divide that by 52, that's a crap ton of shout outs a week.
That's great.
And so, like, what I always say is, like, it's really difficult to have a toxic work culture when you have shout outs flying everywhere all the time, you know? And I was talking to my VP this morning. She goes, Travis, you're pretty charismatic. And in some ways, I think it's a little cultish, like, and I think like she meant that in a positive light. It's like, look, we're a little Magoo and we're a little cheesy. And I encourage people to lean in, never through toxic positivity, but my theory is that we're living through a poly crisis, not undifferent than every other generation, but it's ours and it sucks. And there's a lot of bad things going on in the world. And so, like, why not be slightly over positive at work, right? Like, why not have work be a place that's actually encouraging, you know? And one of my favorite things is hearing people say, gosh, I wish my family used these core values. So, like, our core values
Oh
aren't
yeah.
random values that like Enron put on the wall, right? Like that are just like a poster. They're like, this is what we live by, deliver faithfully. I want to be a person that delivers faithfully to my wife, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, having values, like, one of my favorite things to see, we have multiple team members who have been with us for years who have put the core values of Glide on their wall at their home.
Wow.
And so, like, realizing how valuable these things are and how they can inspire us to live a better life and become a better version of ourselves. And so, when we're doing these shout outs, a lot of times we include the values in them, so we kind of name the value when we're shouting people out. And so, yeah, I mean, and then we divide it by the number of people. So we have a metric, which is shout outs per person per week. And the goal would be somewhere between 3 and 5 per week, right? Which is pretty powerful. You just think, okay, well, if you have 20 people times 3 to 5, I mean, that's a lot of recognition and praise and encouragement getting passed around in a given week.
That's good. That's good. And we preach a lot of those things. So the fact that seeing it in action, hearing it about it in action, I think just further goes to show what kind of difference that can make in an organization. And yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to show up to a job or a gig that's like overly positive? I definitely don't think that that's a bad a bad thing, and I'm not sure anybody can put a bad spin on that one. So Travis, we can tack off the table for this one, unless it's part of your answer. But I'm curious, if we think about tomorrow's leaders, what do they need to grasp about people and culture that I think a lot of today's leaders might be missing, and maybe are there misconceptions that the business leaders need to shake off when it comes to people dynamics?
Man, that's such a good question. I mean, there's a part of me that just kind of sees this kind of conscious capitalism, business as a force of good, is like stalled a little bit, which
Yeah.
is like kind of a foundation for the direction we've been heading. I mean, when you look at the world, it's just a kind of a crueler, harsher place. I mean, it's like zero sum. If you're not my friend, you're my enemy. There's nothing in between. And it's a little bit the political climate, and not to kind of dip into that at all, but just,
I was just going to say, do you want to run for office? I think that
yeah,
we need a leader like you.
never, never. But I will say that, kind of just thinking about this, like, it's trying to find the balance again, kind of just kind of tapping Jim Collins, this idea of preserve the core, stimulate progress. So you have a company like Facebook, Meta, Zuckerberg, and I feel like he's making these knee jerk changes over the years where they get in all this trouble, with the analytics scandal, and then they try to become a metaverse company, and then they reverse course and focus on AI, and they have just fired a zillion people, and I just feel like they have a pretty clear picture of where they're going, stimulate progress, but they're lacking the preserve the core, the core ideology, the purpose, the values. And, for being one of the largest companies in the world, it's kind of sad, and so, but I also see the need right now, especially when you look at AI and you just think about how this is disrupting kind of so many different industries. that there is a level of urgency and a level of adaptivity and a level of like kind of moving fast and breaking things that is necessary. Like we're in a moment of transition. And I think that anytime there's a major disruptive general technology,
Yeah.
there's always going to be a large kind of component of transition. I mean, if you look at, I don't know, the cathode ray tube or the personal computer or the internet or cloud computing or the mobile device, the smartphone. I mean, all of these were like major transitions, major general purpose technologies. Don't confuse that with generative, but like, general purpose technologies that had massive kind of groundswells in transition and digital transformation. And so I think that like one of the things you're seeing right now is like teams are becoming more lean.
Yeah.
You can get more done with less people. And so I think the difficult kind of journey we're on right now is like, how do you employ? I mean, if you know that we're moving into a future where AI and agents of AI can do the work of five people that used to be able to do this work and now they don't. Um, I think empathy. It just goes back to empathy. It's funny. One of my favorite kind of quotes. I don't even know where I heard this. I think it was like literally in a chat in a work in a Slack shared workspace. But people don't stay at a job because of money. That's like number 3 to 5 on their list. The number one reason they stay at a job is their boss or manager. The second reason is generally going to be work-life balance. And the third is usually going to be skill match. Like, are they getting fulfilled in their role? Do their skills match and then after that, as long as they're in a quartile of pay that's kind of reasonably, relevant,
Yeah.
they're going to stay at that job. And now this may be different for people that are looking for a job. I'm speaking specifically people that are in a job already. And I mean, just like a perfect example of this as an anecdote is like, Dell, which is a gigantic company. I mean, they basically said, hey, return to work, return to the office. If you don't return to the office, then you will be passed up for promotion. You won't be able to be promoted. Half the company elected not to return to office.
Wow.
Half of a gigantic enterprise company. And it just shows you how incredibly important work-life balance is, over, pursuing a career and growth and all these other things. And so, to me, I think that what that tells us is the incredible importance of leadership in
Yeah.
the journey of their employees, of their reports. And so there's a beautiful book called What Got You to Here Won't Get You to There. And I just always love this book. And it just talks about as you grow as a leader, you will always kind of, as you elevate up, you're going to get less and less feedback. And it's your job to go out and find it, to ask for it, because it's kind of like the emperor's, not wearing any clothes, right? Like no one wants to tell you the worst traits about you. The
Yeah.
higher you get, the higher you, from a manager to a director to a leader to C-suite to a founder, And so one exercise people might do, it takes less than 15 minutes, and it can be life changing. I did this through an agency leadership initiative with Carl Sakis. Was I sent a 360 or a feedback request to 26 people, and it was 6 questions. It was, what should what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I continue doing? And do you have any other feedback that you'd like to give? And here's the beauty of this is it was anonymous. And so it was just like a Google form. And I sent this to 26 people and just said, I'm trying to become a better version of myself. I'd love to get your honest feedback. It'll take 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. And it was really deeply valuable for me. I took this feedback and of course I skipped all the positive stuff. so, uh, but I took all of the constructive stuff
Yeah.
and put it on this board. And by the way, it's kind of like the criticism sandwich, because the first question was like, what are my strengths? And the last question is, what should I continue doing? And everything in between is the constructive stuff. And so it allows people to kind of like warm up with the positive stuff
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
finish
Yeah.
with the positive stuff. But I mind mapped all of this constructive feedback into basically 6 kind of core areas, and then I summarized it all into kind of 3 pillars to focus on. So for me as a leader, I realized that I needed to work on letting go, because I tend to try to own too many things and then I'm pulled in a million directions. Another thing for me was work-life balance. I tended to work too much and I didn't spend enough time, with my family, and people could see that. Like, they're like, Travis, when's the last time you've gone on vacation? you know, because you will only, if you work at a company that has a limited vacation, you will only ever go on as many vacations as your leader goes on.
That's right. Well,
And so if I don't mind, anyway, so I'm going long, but the point I'm trying to make is, I think as a leader, having empathy, right, getting into people's shoes, and then asking for feedback, and just realizing that you are the most important component to the success of your endeavor, but not just yours, the people underneath you and the organization you serve.
I think you've pointed out a lot of great things today. I think leaders who are looking for ways to get it right, with their people, with their growing teams, retaining their people, those things that they need to be from doing from the beginning, right? Defining those values, choosing empathy, and getting a lot of feedback, is some pretty powerful advice. Well, thank you, Travis. I know we're running short on time. I really, really appreciate you coming back for round two. This was fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you being here.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I'm thrilled to be able to share, and hopefully something I've shared is going to make a meaningful impact on the folks listening.
I think it already made one on us. I think I'm taking notes. For everyone watching, listening, appreciate you joining Travis and Emmy for today's episode of Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this fireside chat. While you're at it, be sure to check us out at mustardhub.com to see how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time.